Hey there, everyone. How you doing? Lee Strahan. Nice to see you. Hope you're having a nice weekend. I'm the founder of Citizen Journalism School, and I want to talk a little bit about what's going on with the war with Ukraine and Russia and why time is so important in figuring out news stories, and a few things that I do as a journalist that you can rip off and to help figure out stories. So often, one of the biggest problems in any news story, when you're trying to figure out what's going on, is trying to figure out how it started. Where did this come from? What's the origin of this? So, for instance, on the current Russian-Ukrainian war, we're told by the U.S. this is an unprovoked attack. And because they say it's unprovoked, they have to fill in psychological analysis of Vladimir Putin, which is he's a crazy nut. I don't mean that in a sort of Bill Murray, you crazy nutball, give you noogies sense. I mean that they literally try to say, well, he's power crazy, or he's trying to set up he wants to rebuild the Soviet Union and stuff like that. You've heard all of those arguments. Those arguments are necessary. There we go. I think that's better. So I'm not sure if anyone heard any of that, so I'm just going to say what I said again, which is the concept of time is very important when you're looking at news stories. Because if you're trying to figure out what's going on, knowing where it started is important. I'll explain that in regards to the Russian-Ukrainian war. And I was saying that America, the West, the UK's argument is that this is a completely unprovoked attack. And so because they say the attack was unprovoked, they have to fill in other explanations. And that's why you see so many stories that are analyzing the psyche of Vladimir Putin, trying to say, well, he's crazy, or he wants to put the Soviet Union back together, or his girlfriend broke up with him, or whatever they say. They have to do that because they can't say what is easy for you to research and figure out. What he's saying this has to do with was, and this goes back to the time topic, something that started in 2014 when the United States overthrew the democratically elected government of Ukraine. That was a neutral government. The Yanukovych government was open to working with Russia or the West. You'd think that a neutral government, that'd be fine. And it would be fine by Russia. It's not fine by us. So we overthrew that government. And that's what he's saying. Now, there's a trick that people do. And I'm going to talk about the government doing it. I just did, really. And then I'll talk about Glenn Beck doing it. When the government cuts off the timeline as though nothing preceded the invasion, as though what happened in 2014 did not happen, they are spinning the narrative. It's a propaganda technique. They don't want you to know that there could be some rational reason. I'll put it like this. If Vladimir Putin had invaded in 2015, there would have been a much more proximate cause. In other words, people would go like, well, the coup happened and then Putin invaded. But what happened was the coup happened, then Crimea happened. And Crimea was not an invasion. They're trying to pretend it's an invasion. Well, go look into it. That was an election. That was people who wanted to rejoin Russia. And so what Russia did was, if you look on the timeline, the Minsk agreements happened. And then the Minsk II agreements happened. And that was negotiated between France, Germany, Russia, and Ukraine. and they were agreed to, and Ukraine has not lived up to them at all and has refused to live up to them and has basically said in an article in Deutsche Welle, the German news service, they said, well, they were never going to live up to them. Glenn Beck did this. I was covering Ukraine for about 4 years, and I'm not comparing, because Beck is a performer. I'm a journalist who occasionally performs. If I make dumb jokes, it's to make this more enjoyable, because we're dealing with potential assassinations if Lindsey Graham has his way, and nuclear war if a lot of people in the West have their way. They keep pushing this. But, so I try to lighten it up with dumb jokes sometimes. Sorry. But Glenn Beck is just a performer. But I was covering Ukraine, and people like Alexandra Chalupa and Andrei Telezenko, who was the ambassador who Alexandra Chalupa contacted. I've talked about that separately. Look into that if you're interested. But when Beck started covering it, it was the same material that I'd covered. And Beck has stolen my stories before. When I was at Breitbart, he would steal my stuff all the time. And I've talked to Beck a couple times. I've been on when Dana Lash had a show over there. I was on there. But Beck, he did the chalkboard. Remember that? He put it all up on a chalkboard. But the problem was the chalkboard omitted the 2014 coup. Go back and look at his flipping chalkboard. That's a propaganda technique. And I called him on it at the time. I said, why is he leaving out the 2014 coup? To me, there's one question, and every elected representative, especially Republicans, needs to answer it. Were you in favor of the Obama and Biden administration overthrowing a democratically elected government in 2014 in Ukraine? Because the Yanukovych government was democratically elected. Not only that, but that election was certified. A European Commission looked into it because there had been problems with this previous election. So they wanted to make sure everything was on the up and up. Go look into that if you want to. The Yanukovych election was a certified election. We didn't say this is an invalid election. We just helped overthrow it along with George Soros. So I want to know from my elected representative. I'm in South Dakota. Kristi Noem's the governor up here. She's been yapping about this. So is John Thune, the senator from up here. Do you support the 2014 coup? That's what I, as a citizen, want to know. Because I don't support the coup of any country. I don't think we should be doing that. For one reason, it's wrong. For another reason, it's impractical. It always bounces back to hurt us. So it's wrong. We shouldn't overthrow democratically elected governments. And it doesn't work. It's immoral and impractical. And I want to know why Republicans are not saying boo about it. And the reason they're not is because of time. They don't go back and look at the time. They don't say what started this. Now, one of the techniques that I use to keep track of this is making timelines. And I would recommend it highly. Let me tell you, there's a program called Aeon Timeline. AEON. Look it up. I use that. That's very fancy and high tech. Let me tell you the non-fancy, old school, analog, retro grunge way to do it is go over to your local Walmart. I got one across the street here in Sioux Falls. And get yourself a pack of index cards. And then a writing implement of some kind, a pencil, a pen, a crayon, if that's all they let you use at the home. That's fine. I'm not judging. Been there, done that. But get a pack of index cards and something you can write with. And then what you do is start to write down the events. And so write down, for instance, I think I'm getting the date right. I think the invasion started February 27th, I believe. I could be wrong on that. I'm going off the top of my head, and that's problematic sometimes. But you write down, you figure it out. You'd say, okay, it's February, let's say it's February 27th. You go, okay, it's February 27th, 2/27 is what I do because I'm lazy. I don't want to write out all of February. I can figure out what 2 means. You probably can too. Congratulations. Then I'd put down 2/27 invasion. And I'd put that down. Then I'd hear people, I'd go look at what Putin's saying. He's saying there was a coup on I think it's the same date, 2/27, I believe, 2014. Then put Euromaidan coup on that index card. Now, what preceded that? Well, if there was a coup, there must have been an election. So then I'd find the date of the election, and I'd put that on an index card. And all around this, I'd go, okay, did Russia issue any demands? Yes. When did they do that? That was in January sometime. So I'd figure out the date and I'd write that down. And you just write down the events on the index cards. Then you take your index cards and you start to put them in chronological order. And I'm telling you, even though you think you know what happened and the order things happened in, it flows out of your head. It's nothing personal. I'm sure your head you feel like it's fairly non-leaky. Mine's a little leaky after 3 strokes or half a dozen strokes, 3 hospitalizations. See, I've had so many strokes, I don't even remember how many strokes I've had, but I've had about a half dozen. Anyway, my point here is, when you start laying out the facts, even in this analog, grungy, old-school, retro way with the index cards. And by the way, the other thing maybe you want to get is a rubber band, a nice thick one, to put around the index cards. Or if you got a female person in your life, maybe you are one, maybe one of those hair scrunchy things. Not the big ones, but the thin ones. Something to take your index cards that are in order and keep them in order. If you're a rubber band and you're a guy, not a lady, you can have fun. Because that game where you put the rubber band on your friend, then you snap it on him, that is hours of fun. Every man knows that. But start to make a timeline. And once you make the timeline, it will help you understand what's going on in a news story. I like the digital method where I use Aeon Timeline, and I'll often start in a spreadsheet. Like Sheets is a program that's free from Google. Apple has one called Numbers. Microsoft, if you're into Bill Gates, Excel is a spreadsheet. And each line on the spreadsheet is date, event, and you can rearrange things that way. It's another way to go. Because once you've got dates in there, you can hit the top of the column and everything arranges itself. And we talked about some of that stuff in Citizen Journalism School, which you can sign up for, citizenjournalismschool.com. And we have lots of new stuff coming very soon, just in time for you to help save the world and maybe make a little bit of a living doing it. Anyway, that's what I wanted to leave you with now. Now I got to figure out which button, because my Automagic button is not working for some reason. So I should be able to hit this, and it just goes away. It did it. There we go. So anyway, let me go. I love you guys. I'll talk to you later. Hopefully you learned some stuff. Follow me on Twitter if you're not doing it. Please subscribe on YouTube. Ring that bell. If you're a new subscriber, please subscribe. I also, if you go to patreon.com/Stranahan, I do a show, Jason Goodman, every week called High Dive, where we go into some things in a very, very deep way. And the other thing I should mention to you is that on Twitter, I'm doing these things called Spaces, and we've had a couple hundred people in there where I answer questions about Ukraine. We've been doing those at night, and I may do it again tonight. Anyway, I love you guys. Talk to you later. Bye.